Five Rings Podcast, your weekly amateur sports and Olympic sports show with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie. And now, without further ado, here's Duane Rollins.
And welcome to the Five Rings Weekly Podcast. I'm Duane Rollins in freezing cold Toronto again. It was nice for the last couple days. Kevin, what the hell happened?
I don't know. I still can't believe that we're in March, when in my head we're still in January. And I have no hope of seeing the sun ever again.
Yeah, but you're going to a soccer game tonight, though, right?
I am, but it's indoors. But yes, I am going to a soccer game, a unexpected trip to the Big O tonight that I'm gladly going to do.
Well, yeah, the Costa Ricans are going there. You think they're probably freezing right now? Alajuelense, that's how you say it, right?
Yes, close. But yeah, I think they might be freezing. Yeah, that's a good thing. But we'll see.
I can never say the name. Interesting, the CONCACAF Champions League, we're talking about that, which is more our other show, but we'll give it a brief mention here because the Champions League is something we have touched on different levels of different aspects of it. The Montreal Impact are playing in the semifinals of the North American Club Champions League. So if you're listening outside of Canada, outside of North America, that's what we're talking about. Today's show is actually, we scrambled it together at the last second. We had a different thing planned, but you're going to get a bonus show out of it because we had some technical issues earlier this morning, so we had to reschedule an interview with a man named David Foote who covers junior hockey and covered junior hockey in my hometown of Belleville for many years. I got some bad news last week, and we're going to talk a lot more about this tomorrow. My childhood team, maybe the sports team that mattered the most to me. Anyone who follows my soccer will understand how extreme that statement is going to be no longer in less than a month. They were stolen from us, basically, and moved to Hamilton without giving the community, Belleville, any opportunity to rescue it, to save them, to do what needed to happen to keep them in town. Incredibly unfair situation, but we're going to talk a lot about that tomorrow. Not so much about the specifics of it, although we'll get into that, but I'm going to talk about what a sports team can mean to a community, particularly what a junior hockey team can mean to a small community in Canada, and what it feels like to lose one, because I can talk intimately about that right now, and it doesn't feel very good. But I don't want to bum you out anymore today because we got a pretty good show, and that'll happen tomorrow as a special show. But today's show is going to be our normal show, and I think it's pretty good. We're going to talk a bit about Lindsey Vonn. We're going to talk about Lindsey Vonn's boyfriend and about what video games mean to sports culture and to developing sports fans, because Lindsey Vonn's boyfriend lost the cover of an EA Sports game that he'd been on for years. Yep. Tiger Woods, I think, is his name. Is that right?
Yes, that's pretty much what his name was. What the most famous human being on planet Earth?
All right, I'm going to stick with Lindsey Vonn's boyfriend, though.
Yeah, that's what I would do, too.
Okay. We're also going to talk a bit about the NCAA tournament and a great little piece of comment on Oliver, the comedian, who in some ways is becoming one of the most important journalists in America right now. He basically just eviscerated the NCAA.
He says out loud what we all think, Duane, and yes, he's not afraid to do it.
So we're going to talk a bit about that and a bit about the tournament itself, the NCAA tournament. It's a topic we've touched on before on this show, but we're going to revisit it with the eve of that famous March Madness tournament starting today, because I'm incredibly ambivalent about that, because I know damn well that when those first round games start, I'll probably be watching. I filled out a bracket, but I agree with John Oliver as well, as I've articulated on this show before. We also want to talk briefly about the news roundup. Hamburg has been named the German representative over Berlin in the 2024 bids. This was something that we thought might be happening, and we talked about it a bit before, but they are officially, well, there's one more vote that has to happen, but it's a rubber stamp from what you can tell. Mm-hmm. So it looks like there is now 3 teams in the race for 24, Boston, Rome, and Hamburg, which might be a bit of a surprise. I think a lot of people would have assumed Berlin would have got the nod, but the Germans went with Hamburg for, I think, a couple different reasons. I think that I'm speculating a bit now, but perhaps they didn't want to have 1936 remembered at all.
No, exactly. No comparison point whatsoever to prior Olympics. And not just that, Duane. I think Munich as well. I think if the game would have been to Munich, you would have had the comparison to 1972. Now, if Germany gets the game and it goes to Hamburg, it's a clean slate. It's a new game. There's no comparison that it can be with the cities, at least.
Yeah, look, there are, not to get too serious here for a moment, but there are There is no country in the world that is more strongly opposed and strongly articulates, hatred and distaste towards what happened back in the 30s in that country than the Germans themselves. They are very aware of the mistakes they've made in the past, and I would suspect that would have played a bit of a role in their thinking, that they would not have wanted anyone remembering Hitler's games.
But just the way it's worded, if you're looking at all the press releases, the way it's worded, it says that Germany hasn't had great experiences with the game, and it starts by saying 1972 in Munich, which were just remembered for the tragic killings and attacks, and then the 36 Olympics, which we all remember what they were. So they want to maybe change that history and finally have a game that they can be proud of.
Yeah, and look, I've known, because I lived in Kitchener-Waterloo for many years, and as people that don't know that are outside this country might not realize it, but Kitchener-Waterloo has a massive German expat population. I also knew a lot of Germans that were there on exchange in my university, because I was there for university when I was there. So I have a affinity for the German people. They've made a lot of amends from their history, and I certainly think that they would do a wonderful job if Hamburg were to get the games. The other aspect, to move it into the more pragmatic, modern-day approach to this, 65% of the people of Hamburg have indicated that they're supportive of the games, which makes them much different than what we're seeing in Boston right now, I think.
Yep.
It's more of a 50-50 at best there. I don't want to piss off either side of that, so we'll call it 50-50. Or for that matter, I don't know the Rome thing. There's Italy's politics can be a bit rambunctious at times. The other city that may get into that mix is Paris. There's some more rumblings there that the mayor is beginning to come on boards with the idea of having a bid. I think the four, that might be your race right there: Paris, Hamburg, Rome, and Boston. Real quickly before we take the break and move on and have our conversation about Lindsey Vonn and her boyfriend. What would you think of those four cities, Kevin? Who would be your early favorite?
You remember when we talked about how we would like the games to go a little smaller in the future? Well, that's not going to be the case this time, because all big cities, all cities that represent their country in a way that are flagship cities, in a way that are proud jewels of their each countries. So it's going to be interesting to see if Boston, every city, Duane, too, has a different type of architecture. Those four cities are so different that it's four totally Olympic games that could be different, that can be organized as, I don't know which one I prefer so far. Paris would be something special, but the fact that you can go back to Germany and correct history, it's enticing too. We could go to Boston and have, I think it's a toss-up for me. I like all the proposition for now. It's compared to the games no one wants in Almaty. Those games are really looking good so far.
Yeah, from a purely personal level, look, I have two feelings in the Boston, and I've talked to enough people on the No Boston Olympics side that I want to make sure that city truly has had a conversation that satisfies them before I'm willing to cheer for them. I have no problem with the games going to Boston from a personal level. I would travel to them for sure. I would enjoy them. I think that Boston is a wonderful city that has a lot of culture and can really unique culture in a lot of ways that represents a lot of the American experience, and it would be a wonderful games. But I'm not ready yet to support that bid until I'm convinced that the city itself supports the bid, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does make sense. Huh?
Also, in the back of my head, the 2028 would be back in North America then, and there's other aspects to that we won't get into right now, Toronto. But for the European cities, Rome has a lot of appeal. I think that it has, the architecture would be stunning. I think that the backdrop to those games would be amazing. The history in that city is just awesome. I have this vision of the Coliseum somehow being used in some way.
For wrestling, come on, for the wrestling tournament inside.
Yeah, or maybe MMA makes its debut.
Interspecies MMA lion versus, no, you can't do that.
Well, anyway.
Hey, you never know. We're closer than we were, so.
Demonstration sport. God knows what happened in 10 years or so. So there's a lot of appeal to that, and I think from aesthetic level, Paris kind of leaves me a bit cold. And I don't know, maybe that's the angle at me, but I don't know if the city wants them enough, and they've had them twice before, and I've seen games in France already. I think France is better set up to maybe go after another winners games. The Albertville games were well done, and I think that there's some aspects there. So the Hamburg Games and the idea for Germany to have a third crack at it, I think that might be fun too. So I kind of lean a bit towards Hamburg right now out of those four cities, but I can see value in all of them. In terms of who I think will win, if I had to put a bet down right now, I'd go with Boston.
Yeah, probably.
I think it's a rotational thing. It hasn't been in the United States in a long time. So if Boston gets its public support together, I think that they might be the front runner, and that's my honest opinion there. But we'll see, and we'll obviously continue to follow this very closely in the days ahead. Let's Kevin take a quick break, come back, and we'll have a conversation about Lindsey Vonn and her boyfriend.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, the last 2 years have been pretty tough, and a lot of people counted me out. A lot of people thought I would never reach this record. A lot of people thought that I would never win again, and I never stopped believing in myself, and I think I proved everyone wrong.
Welcome back, and before we get going, I wanted to have a really quick talk about how you can help us give you better programming with Patreon. Patreon is a service that allows you to donate whatever you can afford per month to us to allow us to continue to do what we do and maybe improve it, maybe add some shows in the future. Kevin, why don't you jump in now and explain how the listeners can help us out with that service?
Patreon.com, patreon.com/2solitudes5rings. You can donate a quarter, 50 cents, $1 a month. If you can afford it, $10. If you can afford 1,000, we're not going to say no, but we're not asking for it. We can ask you for $1 a month, $2 a month, whatever you can afford to support the production of original content and coverage of your favorite sports here on the Five Rings and the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, let's move on and have a conversation about Lindsey Vonn. Lindsey Vonn won the Small Globe this past weekend. The Small Globe means that you won one of the individual events in the alpine skiing disciplines. Mm-hmm. In her particular case, she won the downhill, which is I think it's probably fair to say her specialty, her best event. It's also the most prestigious of the events. I mean, I think there's probably some Europeans that might argue for the slalom. It's on either end of the spectrum.
Exactly.
The slalom or the downhill is generally your prestigious, your most technical skier, and your bravest, insanest skier.
I think insanest, is the best way to put it. The craziest skier out there.
Yeah, I think even the Europeans, if you put a gun to their head or get them really drunk, will admit that the downhill is the one that they most want to win, because it's kind of it invokes everything that skiing and those kind of sports are. It's about bravery, and it's about technical, and it's about just that ability to throw yourself down a hill and get to the bottom as quick as possible. At any rate, we're getting a little off topic. Lindsey Vonn won that, and I just wanted to highlight that. We don't highlight a lot of individual performances on the show. We talk more general and more overall viewpoints in here, but I think in this particular case it's worth mentioning because this is a woman that has had quite a long career. She's 30 now, and she kind of broke onto the scene when she was 19, 20.
And a lot of injuries too in her last couple of years, but in her entire career too.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly it. She's had horrible bad luck. This is a woman who in a different era had, if the knees were a little bit better, and let's say we go ahead 50 years and they can make bionic knees for skiers, I think that this is a woman that would have multiple Olympic medals. Well, she does have multiple Olympic medals. Technically she has 2, but you know what I mean. She'd have much more than that. She'd
Remember
have
Vancouver, or anytime she could have performed and finally get that Olympic performance, she had an injury. Same thing in Sochi. Incredible bad luck and the worst timing, but this year another rebound season, and usually when she comes back, she wins, Duane.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that a lot of people after the last injury that knocked her out of Sochi assumed that her career was probably done. If you blow out a knee at 29, that's a lot different than blowing one out at 19. And but she came back and showed what kind of skill she has. Just for those that don't know, her 2 Olympic medals. She did win the Olympic downhill in Vancouver and won a bronze as well at the Vancouver Games. That was the only games in which she was healthy.
I meant the games earlier. That's what I meant. In Torino, she was injured. She couldn't perform as she wanted to. She did in Vancouver.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said before, she's just had tremendous bad luck. And she's always been the poster girl for a lot of reasons. But she's been the poster girl for her skill and for her beauty. Let's not kid ourselves. But in the American Olympic build-up for the Winter Games. And she's just never had the opportunity. It's not that she's blowing it. Like, there's other athletes out there that we can look at that are always the face of the games that end up choking, but this is not a woman who's choked. It's a woman whose knees won't hold up to her skill. And I think this particular victory this year, to me, it maybe is her crowning achievement for her to come back and win the World Cup after that injury in the dead year, the year when the motivation is at the lowest following an Olympics. You're furthest away from another games. At 30, to me, that's an incredible accomplishment that needs to be recognized, and we need to recognize just how skilled of an athlete Lindsey Vonn is, and I wanted to highlight that in this show.
And not just skilled, Duane, the motivation she needs to, like you say, perform on a year after the Olympic cycle is finished. Still 3 years and a half until the next Winter Game. She still hasn't committed for the next Winter Games, so she could have retired, Duane. She could have just recovered, took her time to get back healthy. No, she decided to focus on rehab to get ready as quick as possible and to go back this season to perform. Even though her beginning of the season was delayed a little bit for she was getting back on form, she performed like she knows how, and just the motivation she needed to be able to win this year compared to any other years because of the fact that it's after the Olympic. The next Olympics are so far away. It's the dark year because you're looking at the next challenge, the next hill, and it seems so far away. But she still made it this year.
Yeah, I would think the fact that she came back and competed and was successful in competing this year might be an indication that she will push forward for 3 years. But when you're talking about that kind of age with a skier, it's not a sport you see. There's been examples. There have been exceptions, I should say.
They're from Austria usually, don't they?
Yeah, there have been a few Austrians that have skied late into their 30s for sure, but it is rare, particularly on the female side of things because of other aspects that always influence female athletes' decisions to retire. But I wouldn't shock me. I wouldn't also shock me if she specializes, hones in on one event rather than tries to, win the overall World Cup anymore and things like that. And no one could blame her if she did that. If she just tried to focus maybe on the downhill for 3 years to take less strain on her body. I mean, you can't. It's such a fine line, downhill skiing. It's such a demanding sport, physical, that it's rare to go late into your 30s because there's so much can go wrong.
Just the G-force that accumulates on your knees and on your lower back when you're taking those turns at around 100 something miles an hour, it accumulates. It takes a toll on the body.
Yeah, well, even us as recreational skiers or snowboarders can understand the difference in how our body feels now versus how it felt when we were teenagers doing it, right? Like, it's a strain. At any rate, the point is, this is a freak of nature athlete in a lot of ways, though. So, it wouldn't shock me if she was in South Korea in 3 years, but I think she probably well specialized into one thing. The last part of this conversation is Lindsey Vonn the best female skier of all time? That's a hard conversation to have. We'd really need to study it for a while and look at overall results and all that. But I certainly think, and this is what I'll say about that, I think she's in that conversation. It's unfortunate that the Olympic medals aren't there. There's only the two, but only the two Olympic medals.
Only two.
Like I have 10 in my closet or something. No, I don't have any in my closet. If I did, they'd come off eBay. Yeah. So, but had she had more Olympic medals, I don't think the conversation, it would be easier to measure this conversation. But certainly,
and there was a lot of great skiers too, Duane. That's the thing. There's a lot of great Italian, Czech, German, Austrian, French. A lot of great women skiers in the history of the sport too.
All right. Last point, like one of my childhood heroes that we've talked about a few times in here, Lindsey came from Minnesota, which doesn't have a lot of mountains. So Steve Poborski comes from Don Mills. She comes from Minnesota. Maybe that's the key. You have to grow up on a flat land.
You have to be scared when you put on a hill. That's how you go fast.
The first time he can't turn. Ah!
Oh, that's how you do it.
That's kind of how I ski, at any rate. Let's talk about her boyfriend.
Yeah, interesting. If you're a video gamer, if you're just interested in sports general, this week EA Sports announced that for the first time, well, it's bringing, first of all, its golf game to the next generation of consoles, so for PS4 and Xbox One. It's bringing the EA Sports Tour game, but it's changing the name from Tiger Woods PGA Tour to, drumroll, To Rory McDonald. Rory McDonald. I missed it. That's an MMA fighter.
McIlroy.
Rory McIlroy. It's
Yes.
Mac. It still fits a little Irish a little bit. But now, Rory McIlroy is the new face of EA Sports Tour PGA game. It's going to be, it's a change, Dwayne. I never thought I would have seen that day.
No one did. I mean, Tiger Woods is a fascinating athlete in a lot of ways.
He's out with Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, well, yeah, his age, he's the same age as me. So I've grown up watching Tiger Woods' career sort of ebb and flow. And I can still remember, I was on Twitter the day that the night that the infamous incident happened.
2009.
And it was massive on Twitter that night. The place blew up and everyone was talking about it and all that. I don't think anyone at the time assumed it would derail his career. And I think the fact that it did derail his career, to a certain extent, he's won events since then, but he hasn't won a major since then. And up until then, it seemed inconceivable that he wouldn't win another major, right? It shows how mental the game of golf is, how much it's about your head, right? Correct?
Oh, yeah. It's one of the weirdest sports to play, and especially at the high performance, because anything can affect your game, and you have to always be consistent by doing the exact same thing the exact same way almost every time. It's such a different type of sport than any other sport. It's not aerobic, but you do walk a lot, and you have to walk, and it's temperatures and consistency, and you have certain time to do. It's interesting to look at, and it's more intricate than it looks from the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what athlete his career reminds me of the most is another athlete from my childhood and teen years, is Mike Tyson, the boxer, who Mike Tyson seemed unbeatable. He seemed from a different planet until he got beat. And in Tiger's case, he was beat by a golf club wielded by a very angry, a justifiably angry wife.
He was beat by a club, but it wasn't on the golf course.
Yeah, and in Mike Tyson's case, it was Buster Douglas, right? So there's a lot of similarities to that career path, that they seemed unbeatable, and then suddenly they weren't. They were human, and it sort of shows how fragile elite sports can be. But to get back on topic, I wanted to talk about the video game aspect of this, because this is – and Kevin and I are kind of – I'm of the first generation that grew up with video games always part of my life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But Kevin, you're just enough younger than me that you're one of the first people that have grown up where video games are massively part of culture in a way that they weren't quite when I grew up, when I was quite little.
Yep.
And the the EA aspect of building sport fandom, I think, is something that really could be a university thesis almost at this point. It's a fascinating subject.
You still remember NHL 94, for sure. Who doesn't remember NHL 94 on the Genesis? Or those famous games, those famous sports games that literally NFL Blitz, NBA Jam in the arcade, those games create a new fandom. If you talk about NBA Jam in the mid-90s, look where the NBA is today. It's the generation of kids who played that game in the mid-90s today are in love with the NBA. Same thing for FIFA. Well, Tiger Woods in the mid-90s, late 90s, when PGA Tour started, that's what it created. Of course, Tiger Woods was everywhere in the media, so it created more spotlight, a more talked about sport with golf. But with the PGA game on video games, well, it brought that game to kids that are maybe don't have the money to play golf, or don't have the resources, or they don't know people to play golf, or maybe they live like us here in Canada where we could only play golf for about 2 weeks in the summer. So when you're like this, the video games make you discover the sport, make you play the sport, experience the sport, and get to know the players, get to know the golfers. You become a fan of the sports in general just by playing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, FIFA, for a generation of kids, isn't necessarily an acronym for the governing body of soccer. It's a video game title.
It is.
And FIFA is a fascinating one, and it is worldwide appeal. Madden, of course, you didn't mention Madden in the list there for NFL fans. When you listen to CFL fans, one of the biggest complaints I hear to this day in the Canadian Football League is that there's no video game for them, and there's a lot of people that swear up and down that the biggest thing that could happen to the CFL is if they could get someone to make a video game for them. And they're not, they might not be wrong, because there is an element of fandom that is developed through that. I'm going to go back a great history I have, and this goes back to the NHL lockout in '04. My ex-brother-in-law was a hockey fan, a massive hockey fan. And during that lockout, there was no hockey to play, but they loved video games, and they had FIFA, and they picked up and started playing FIFA obsessively, him and his friends. He's about your age, probably, Kevin, at any rate. And through playing FIFA, they all developed a interest in soccer that they maintained to this day. I know that Scott, for instance, became a Manchester United fan because he always used to play Manchester United on the FIFA. He always would play his buddy who played with Chelsea, so he became a Chelsea fan. They had another friend that would play with Liverpool, and he became a Liverpool fan. And I'm not even kidding. This is absolutely how they became fans of soccer.
That's how I became a fan of soccer, Duane. Well, I played when I was a kid, but how I became a soccer fanatic like I am today is 6-7 years ago. I started playing FIFA. That's how it started to me.
Yeah, and I think that story is not that rare. And I think that if you obviously when if you're in cultures where the sport's ingrained, it's not quite the same. But you look at hockey and NHL, the NHL title when it comes out, there's massive lineups here in Canada to pick the damn video game up. And I do think that it does help kids. I think it hurts the traditional franchises here in Toronto. I think that you walk around, not only the Leafs losing doesn't help, but the fact that the Leafs do lose, and then beyond that, these kids are exposed to the players that they play with on their NHL console, makes them more likely to
to get traded when you're playing franchise at NHL.
Yeah, to play with the Ducks or the Capitals. I see a lot of Ovechkin jerseys walking around in the city of Toronto. Like, obviously if the hometown team is good, then that's going to change things. But it certainly does make a challenge for organizations to reach out because there's this global aspect. I mean, there's lots more at play here, right? Like you can get the TV stuff you get the streaming. It's just more accessible. The hometown doesn't necessarily hold you in the same way that it used to. But I think the video game aspect of it is a huge one, and it was illustrated by how much news came out when they took Tiger Woods' name off of the video game this week.
You know what's interesting too? That franchise, if you're looking at the EA Sports or EA Games the sports games, it's the first one that actually changes itself. It's the first one that changes the name. If you're looking at all the big names, the Madden, NHL, and NBA, they all have the same name for almost 20 years now. The first one to change is Rory Mccillroy EA Sports PGA Tour. That's a new one. And they took the chance they had by moving to the next gen. They had a small window of opportunity. They went about 18 months without a new game coming out. And they took the opportunity they had then to make that change and to bring to the next gen a new star, the star for the next generation of golfers to come. And that's Rory Mccillroy. And I think it's going to have an effect on that franchise, that is going to reboot it. It's going to bring it to a younger generation that were not into Tiger Woods and were not drawn to that cover because, let's face it, the cover of a video game still brings you to at least take a look at it before you play it.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Rory's a younger guy that sort of appeals to a younger generation, and that's especially with a game like golf. I think that's a big part of their marketing is they want to appeal to that younger generation. Putting a 40-year-old on there isn't going to exactly a 40-year-old that hasn't won anything in a long time, even though still kind of young for the sport. But it's not gonna really do the pull in. It's just an interesting cultural phenomenon that I wanted to bring up here, and I thought that it was quite interesting, and it also tied in, and I could make the Lindsey Vonn's boyfriend joke for a lot of times, so that made it fun there. Kevin, I'll end it this. If you had to pick a desert island game, Kevin, if you had a desert island game, what would it be?
A sports game. Well, that's basically all I play is a sports game. It's going to be a toss-up between FIFA, well, the most recent FIFA game, and the most recent fighting game. I'm not going to lie, boxing or MMA games and FIFA games are the most games that it's fun to play either alone or online. And I had to bring probably be FIFA though for the playability factor that you can probably play for 12 months before you get bored.
Fair enough. And I'm a different kind of animal when it comes to video games.
Football Manager?
My Football Manager would absolutely be my desert island game. And that would be a whole other topic. The Sims are a different gig. Maybe that's a generational thing. I don't know. But Football Manager has huge addictive qualities for a lot of people out there.
Absolutely. Just slightly off topic, there's a book that's called Football Manager Ruined My Life. It's quite good if you're into the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. For just as a quick note, just 2 nights ago, I led Toronto FC to a playoff berth on Football Manager. So I think
that game's fixed. You see how unrealistic it is?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk about something that's not fixed, but maybe needs to be fixed, the NCAA tournament.
And if you're thinking, well, they'll all get rich when they become professional athletes, that's true in a fractional number of cases, because less than 2% of college basketball and football players go pro. So if you're an athlete who dreams of being a Viking or a wizard, you probably have about the same chance of becoming an actual Viking or an actual wizard.
And we're back, and it's that special time of year again, Kevin. It is the time of year when we all suddenly think that we know what we're talking about when it comes to college basketball.
Oh, you mean it's the time of year we watch a unpaid player sweat and give them their all on a hardwood floor?
Absolutely, yeah. John Oliver, for those that don't know what John Oliver is, he's a comedian that used to be on The Daily Show that has his own show this week tonight, right? Yeah, anyway, it's a great parody journalistic show that needs to be watched by everyone. If you don't have HBO, you can get the clips on YouTube. They make them all available. They had a great clip this week, which was his main story on the NCAA tournament, and more to the point on the NCAA in general, talking about how they don't pay their athletes, how they don't compensate their athletes in any real way beyond the scholarship. Now, this is a topic we've had here before. It's a topic that divides opinions in a lot of ways. There are a lot of people that think that it would be wrong to pay NCAA athletes. John Oliver does a great job illustrating that some level of compensation, or at least some loosening of the absurd restrictions that prevent, like a coach from – one of the examples he gave was a coach got sanctioned for buying a lunch for a kid whose parents had just died. You know, like, come on. Yep. Loosening some of that stuff, it needs to happen, and the amount of wealth that goes into the NCAA is just so absurd that it's beggars belief that they wouldn't be able to work something out that would at least guarantee scholarships, or at least allow for humanitarian things, like, you know, for kids starving, you can buy them some food or give them some food coupons or some credit at the bookstore or some damn thing.
Free food at the cafeteria. With the amount of money they make, Dwayne, they have enough money to probably give free education to every single kid in North America. That's the amount of money that the NCAA make. So they should start by at least giving free food to everybody. It's mind-boggling to me. You just mentioned the food part, because if you're looking at a couple of different legit post-game interviews on Fox Sports 1, on Fox, on anywhere during this season of the NCAA, some kids are talking about how it was hard. I've had a lot of hungry nights, not be able to make ends meet, but it's all worth it playing basketball. Is it really worth it having hungry nights? You should be fed at least. It's bare minimum, no?
Well, no, yeah, it is, absolutely. And look, there are the argument counter to that is that these kids are in basically the development system that they are shepherded into in order to make the pros. And this is the other issue that I come at from this from. We as Canadians have a different perspective on the NCAA. We kind of have a unique perspective, in my opinion, because we both are exposed to it a lot, that we sometimes become fans of it. Certainly when it comes to March Madness, I will fully admit that when the tournament kicked, the games this afternoon and tomorrow night, I will turn the TV on and I will watch them and I will enjoy them, especially the first 2 rounds. It is a spectacular tournament, and we're going to talk a little bit about the actual tournament itself, not to break it down because I don't know the first clue what I'm talking about in terms of what teams are good, but the idea of the tournament and the structure of the tournament. We'll talk a bit about that in a minute, but I'm a fan that way. But even beyond that, you know, if you live in Windsor or live in Sarnia or something, you might become a fan of Michigan or Michigan State because you can drive there. There was a fundraiser here in town for a friend of mine that takes his kids. He's a football coach here in the city that takes his kids to a major college every year to expose them. They're inner city kids. So there are people that are fans of the NCAA in ways that are greater than just being interested in March Madness or the bowl games, right? That happens. But at the same time, we're outside the system. We see its flaws, and they're not part of our culture. We don't have the same attachment to college sports that Americans do. And we also, I think, have a unique opinion because what I talked about off the top, junior hockey is such a big part of our culture, and junior hockey is an incredibly cynical thing that has a lot of flaws too, but it doesn't hide the fact that it's quasi-professional, which is what the NCAA really is in a lot of ways. And it does give the kids money, not a ton, and way too little in my opinion, but it does give the kids some money that acknowledges that that their education is taking a back seat, and that they have needs, and
They don't have time to work.
yeah, they don't have time to have part-time jobs, and they have needs that go beyond what an average person would in terms of nutrition, in terms of training, and things like that. This is, that's exactly where I'm coming from there. I think that the one aspect that really irritates me about the NCAA, and I come from this from someone who followed CIS, Canadian University Sport, pretty closely and covered it for a while, is that they use this term student athlete, Kevin, and I don't know where the student part comes in the big NCAA programs. Yes, if you're a softball player at a mid-major school, you're a student athlete. You're there because you love softball and you're getting an education from the rate. But if you're a football player at Alabama, you ain't a student. You're not.
You'll be a student after you're done your professional career. You'll come and finish your degree.
In 1% of cases. If you look at the graduation rates of some of the major college sports programs, they are pathetic and they are embarrassing, and they should be
that bad. I wasn't aware that it was that bad. I knew I had a feeling, but I didn't know it was that bad.
Yeah, if you look at basketball, football, major programs, in some cases you are looking at 5-6% graduation rates from their players. That's something that in an educational institution they should be ashamed of. That's what I come down from. And the older I get, the more I push away from university sports because of that very reasons. Because universities aren't there to entertain us. They aren't there to have us cheer for a mascot or for a player to slam dunk or get a touchdown. That's not their role. Their role is to do research and to create intellectual discussion and advanced knowledge. That's a university's purpose, not to play football. And the fact that they have these things here is it's cynical. And I get it, because I went to a Canadian university, but I went to a Canadian university that has a pretty good sports program, and I enjoyed watching those sports a great deal. And to this day, I will cheer for the Wilfrid Laurier Golden Hawks.
And it does bring something to a school too, a sense of belonging. It brings a certain community aspect to a school too. It does have his upside, but you're right. The education, student part of it shouldn't be forgotten.
Absolutely, and the research part shouldn't be forgotten. And if you're a school that can't afford to put proper equipment in its science labs, shouldn't be putting a football team out there, period, in my opinion. And to me, the NCAA has just become this bigger than life thing. But what complicates this is because in the States, for the big American shows or sports in the States, basketball and football, that's the only way you can get to the pros, basically. You have to go through these systems. And to me, that's where it's wrong. And they need to have some kind of in-between area where kids aren't forced in there, and that it allows this student part of a student athlete to become back in the picture again, so that the players that are playing there, maybe they're student athletes. And I think about football is a whole different gig, and it's I'm being a bit naive when I say this, because you can't strip these structures down quickly, but I would hope that eventually you get to the point that there are equatable things to what junior hockey is for athletes in basketball and football that allows them the option of either going through university or going into this program, this development system, this club system that doesn't hide the fact that it's nothing to do with education, because that's where the insult comes to me. The NCAA it's attached to educational institutions, but these athletes are barely students. And to me, that's just so cynical that when I start to think about it, it pisses me off.
That way you wouldn't give false hope to certain athlete as well. Because if you let's not lie to ourselves, the best thing that a student athlete can do is get a free education while playing a sport they can do. But for that, they need to finish that education. And I still can't get over the fact that the graduation rate is that low. And I have to agree with you. Why not? If people don't want to graduate, if your be all end all, your end goal, what you are as an athlete more than anything else, and what you think you have what it takes to make it to the big leagues, well, why not do like a LeBron James and skip college, or have a route to be able to just focus on your sport and not think or if it's your point of view, not waste your own time with education. I'm not saying that it's my point of view. Just saying if you're an athlete and that's your point of view, you should have a way to do it, right? Because you should have the choice of what you want to do.
Absolutely. As John Oliver said, that was something like 2% of the people that end up getting pro careers here. So I think that's something that needs to change. All right, Kevin. Yeah, I had a quick look here on the lines, and the numbers I'm giving in terms of the graduation rate are a little bit extreme, and that's probably my own bias coming through. But certainly you're seeing 40, 50% in some cases, and that's not even counting in the stuff that John Oliver addresses in the piece that we'll make sure that we link out to if you haven't seen it. But if you could just Google it, just as easy too.
And that's talking about all the sports and the student athlete as a whole. But like we were saying to each other before off air, there's a lot of sports that we don't think of that are NCAA sports, like bowling, golf, and stuff like this. And those sports have a way higher graduation rate. So sports like football and basketball, which are the most dominant student athlete sports, well, they don't have the same percentage of graduation anyways.
Yeah, and you also look at the difference between African American students and white students. It's shameful, the difference there. And if you listen to the John Oliver piece, he talks about how there was controversy in North Carolina, which I think we did briefly touch on in the show earlier this year, where they were basically doing shell courses for these players. Because there was such controversy a few years ago over the graduation rates for these programs, so a lot of the programs very quietly created, when I went to university, we called them bird courses. They might be called something else where you were. Courses that everyone knows are a joke to get a good grade in. Well, they went one step further in the North Carolina case. They basically were making it up as they went along. And these players just show up and get the A because they had a friendly professor teaching it. They were outright fraudulent is what I'm trying to say. So, you can look at these grad rates, which are pretty bad on the surface even now, and even put a more skeptical eye on them because you understand, and there's proof that there have been examples out there of universities basically manipulating grades to keep these players eligible. In the one case, in the Oliver piece, their GPAs went from they showed how a GPA could go from a 1.8 to a 3.0 by taking 3 of these shell courses in one semester, and they do that in the spring semester when they're not playing football, and suddenly they're eligible to play football the next year. It's just this horrible cycle that completely prostitutes the purpose of what a university should be, and I think it's just shameful. At any rate, that said,
no, but you're right, and what we can say too. The smart person who just wants to have an education, doesn't play sports, and is not really wealthy or have the money to go to one of those colleges, he's looking at this and is really ashamed of the system because they would just want to learn, just want to be taught something, and they would gladly take the space of one of those athletes.
Yeah, and look, to put my bias out there a little bit further, when I lived in Fredericton, I was around a lot of grad students, and I see how hard they work, and I saw how hard they worked, and I saw how much effort and how they talk about athletes having to put a lot of hours into their day to become great at what they do. Well, researchers do as well. And that's the purpose of the university is to enhance their life, not to enhance the athlete's life. And there should be a better system in place for development that recognizes the fact that education. I think there's a place, as you said a minute ago, for sports at a university, at an educational institution, but I think that the student athlete has to remain in the picture. And right now, I think that, especially the big programs, it's become the athlete that happens to be representing the student body and not necessarily helping the researchers in that institution who do actually work as many hours, just in a different way, and they're exercising a different muscle, the one in between their ears.
You mean the nose muscle?
Yeah, that one. That's exactly what they're exercising. That said, Kevin, I'll probably be watching this afternoon. Will you?
Probably, yes. On my way to the Big O.
Yeah, it's an exciting event, and I think that the structure and the way it's worked is why it's been so successful over the years. The single knockout aspect of it, the fact that it
brackets, just a tournament with brackets, Dwayne. It's fun. It's always fun. Doesn't matter what sports, FA Cup, all those tournament that has a bracket. They're like, okay, we have this one. If we beat this one, we're next to this one. Okay, you know where you're going. You know where you've been, and that bracket exemplifies that. That's one of the things I like about brackets. Just doesn't matter what sport, but if it's a sport that's fun like this too, and the game's an hour, the game's over. It's really fun to watch.
Well, in the jump around aspect, with the tournament, I'm the same as many people. I will watch it a lot during the first two rounds when there are a lot of games going on at once and they're jumping around and now we break in here and now we break in here and it's like it's ADHD, right, coming at you. And it's just very exciting. And I think there's a lot of sports that have learned and have adjusted and have made their system more like that, more rapid fire. It's, is the best team going to always come out at the end? No, but I think that's part of the thing that in North America that we like is the randomness of it, the fact that any team could win at the end of the day. We artificially make parity in a lot of our sports, but this is the
fact that everybody's team got a chance at the beginning makes everybody into the tournament too.
Yeah, although there's never been a 16 seed beat a 1 seed, you know that one day when it happens, it's going to be huge and it's going to be awesome. And even if you've never heard of that 16 seed before, and you probably haven't unless you went there or live near it, you're going to be a great fan of that 16 seed during that tournament run that they have. I remember many years ago now when I traveled through the American Southeast for about 3 weeks back in my early 20s. I backpacked around there because I couldn't afford to get to Europe and I wanted to backpack somewhere. So I went to Atlanta and Charleston and anyway, I did a whole trip around there. But while I was down there, I was in Tennessee by happenstance in Chattanooga when Chattanooga went to the Sweet 16, the University of Chattanooga. I don't think they've even been back since, but I remember being around that city when that was taking place. And there have been very few sporting experiences that I've ever experienced that have matched that in terms of how excited everyone was by it, how everyone everywhere was talking about it. How
they're still talking about it.
Probably, yeah. During the games, I remember drinking at a place called Fat Tuesdays,
nice.
Which is a margarita, margarita, I think, whatever. The milkshakes that are alcoholic. Anyway,
the things you drink and you can't remember.
Yeah, daiquiris. That's what they're called. Anyway, it's a daiquiri bar chain down there that. I remember the funny thing about that place too. They ID'd everyone. They had a sign above their bar that says, "We'll ID everyone." So this guy that walked in that had to be 70 with gray hair didn't have his ID with him, and they refused to serve him. And I thought that was hilarious. But at any rate,
you're clearly underage, sir.
Yes, I remember. I was just 21 at the time, so I was drinking these things and watching this game at this bar with everyone around them. And it was a very fun day. I'll just leave it at that. It was a very fun day, and it had to do with the spirit around it. So I get how there's positives to this, but you also have to take a big picture look at this and remember what the University of Chattanooga is for. And it isn't for a basketball team. It's for the academics that are working just as hard as every athlete there. Kevin?
Absolutely.
On that note, we're going to have our special show tomorrow. It should come out in the middle of the afternoon. I hope you do enjoy it. It is a show that's going to be a bit emotional for me to do because it is something that I'm not making it up when I say that it's very affecting what's happening right now. I think it's wrong, but I hope that you listen tomorrow, even if you're not a junior hockey fan, and put it into your own context because it doesn't have to be hockey. It could be anyone. It could be anything. It's about what sports means to a community and what sports can mean to an individual. In this particular case, a very personal journey that I'm going to take with you tomorrow.
And until tomorrow for the special 5 Rings brought to you by Kleenex, have a great sports in general. And if you're watching tonight, CONCACAF Champions League, Montreal Impact versus Alajuelense.